The line is wherever it happens to fit in their narrative. That's where the line is. How is everybody doing? I'm doing okay, thank you for asking. 'Tis I, the Native Patriot, and as you can tell from the title of the video down below or up above, I wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind for a very long time, which is just me discussing how Native American costumes are harmful to the Native American community. I just really dislike these kinds of arguments, especially the way that these SJWs use this argument of Native American costumes and how it somehow sexualizes Native American women. Crimes against Native American women is not a good thing. We should be looking for actual solutions to the problem. I think these Native American SJWs just don't like people wearing Native American costumes, and they're kind of just dragging the crimes that happen against Native American women as an excuse to kind of bolster their argument, because realistically their argument really isn't an argument. I wanted to just load up on my computer an article. I kind of just wanted to go through it with you guys and talk about it more in depth. So without further ado, portrayals of Native Americans for Halloween causes harm to culture. With Halloween approaching, discussions about cultural appropriation have been stirring on social media, inciting debate about what is offensive and what is not. But it's not about being offended. It literally is about being offended. Indigenous peoples are 2.5 times more likely to be victims of sexual assault crimes compared to all other races. You may be wondering what this has to do with Halloween costumes. Yes, all of us are wondering about that. Let me be clear. Halloween costumes are not the cause of high sexual assault rates in the Native American community. Literally, we could stop here because they pretty much decimated their own argument. And it's interesting because they said here Halloween costumes are not the cause of high sexual assault rates in the Native American community. They admit that, and if you admit that, then why would you even bring up the statistics about sexual assault crimes? Those two things are not related, and you admit that one isn't the cause of the other, but you still bring it up anyways. That's why I wanted to talk about this whole argument, because to me it just does not make sense how they are intertwined. And it says, but the over sexualization. I mean, they could have literally just stopped at Halloween costumes are not the cause of high sexual assault rates. But they put a but here, and that's probably where they went wrong. The over-sexualization and dehumanization of natives caused by these costumes certainly does not do anything to help fix the problem. Also, trying to link Native American costumes to sexual assault statistics also isn't helping the problem. But these SJWs, they're trying to link costumes and sexual assaults together, which they admit that the costumes are not the cause of high sexual assault rates. What they're doing is that their agenda is that we don't want people to wear Native American costumes because it offends us, but they don't actually have a good argument for that. So they're trying to drag Native American crimes against women, they're trying to drag that into the discussion to try to bolster their argument, because the argument has no merit, and that does such a disservice to these Native American women that have actually experienced horrible crimes. But this doesn't matter to SJWs. Whether the wearer of a costume intends to cause harm or not, there will be harm done to the culture as a whole. And so this is a claim that needs justification. It needs evidence, and I know my cat's back there totally ruining my couch. Anyways, this is a claim that the author needs to provide evidence for, because you're making a claim here. For a culture that has historically suffered from sexual violence since the time of the European settlers, anytime I see the word settlers, I'm triggered. Basically, in the Native American SJW community, settler is a bad word. Costumes like the Pocahontas perpetuate a troubling image that Native American women are sexual objects, and this is another claim that this person has to justify or to provide evidence for, but they're just making a claim without providing any evidence. Native women don't walk around with paint on their faces, feathers in their hair, or buckskin mini skirts, but that's what these costumes infer. They don't. They don't. That's why it's a costume. It's a caricature, an extreme caricature. It's not an actual representation. This can be extremely harmful. Again, how? Provide evidence. If you're saying that Halloween costumes are not the cause of high sexual assault rates in the Native community, then how can they be extremely harmful? But there's a fine line between appreciation and appropriation. The line is wherever it happens to fit in their narrative. That's where the line is. I will state this over and over again in this video. At the beginning, it says, let me be clear, costumes are not the reason, but they continue to use that throughout this entire article. Eradicate the Washington football team mascot, which literally, like, there's a lot of Native Americans out there, including myself and including like family members of mine, that do not care about the stupid Washington Redskins thing, and it's ridiculous. Like, most Native Americans, actually, I'm sure I can find a article about that somewhere. Poll finds most Native Americans aren't offended by Redskins name. That was pretty much the end of this here, which is going to bring me to the second part of this video, which is every time I get into an argument online with a Native American SJW and I ask for like evidence of how these costumes are actually harmful and contribute to like these crime statistics against Native American people, they always link me to this, which is here on screen, the summary of the APA, which is the American Psychological Association, resolution recommending retirement of American Indian mascots. The use of American Indian mascots as symbols in schools and university athletic programs is particularly troubling because the schools are a place of learning. These mascots are teaching stereotypically misleading and too often insulting images. Again, just being offended, these negative lessons are just not affecting Native American students. They are sending the wrong message to all students. These are just kind of the bullet points. And it says right here, research has shown that the continued use of American Indian mascot symbols and images and personalities have a negative effect not only on American Indian students but all students by. So they say research shows, and it doesn't link you to the actual research. There is something down here where it says read the full text, which is this part. These are just claims by people in like, I guess, books and stuff like that. But there's not really any studies here that are making the case for this. That's the problem I have when people link me to this stuff, is like, I want to be linked directly to the studies, directly to the evidence. But this is basically just a bunch of people's opinion that mascots should not be a thing anymore. I'm gonna teach on Indian children that it's acceptable to participate in culturally abusive behavior. Again, culturally abusive behavior, where's the evidence there? According to Stephanie Freiberg, PhD, U of A, this appears to have a negative impact on the self-esteem of American Indian children. This is where parents need to step in. All of these things, mental health, self-esteem, all of that should come from home and not society. This sounds really similar to like, society should conform to me. Again, I'm gonna leave the link to this in the description box, but I just wanted to talk about this because I think there's just so many things that irritate me. People are gonna be offended. You don't have a right not to be offended, because literally everybody can be offended by anything, especially in a multicultural cultural society. There's so many different cultures out there. Every culture has their idea of offensiveness, and there's no way that you can not make society as a whole in a multicultural society not be offensive for somebody at some point in some time. Rather, I think that we should be raising our children, especially in the Native American community, to have self-esteem at home, so that when they do go out in the world and experience adversity and all this stuff, and experience like things that they're offended by, they're not going to want to change laws or anything to not be offended by things. And I also hate, it's a disgusting idea that Native American costumes has anything to do with the sexual assault of Native American women, and I hate that SJWs link those two together. That's the thing that's just so frustrating, is that we could be spending more time and resources talking about actual solutions to actual problems, yet Native American SJWs are talking about this bullshit. So I'm gonna stop it there, and I'm gonna stop being triggered. And if you made it to the end of this video, I hope you give me a like and a thumbs up. Leave me your comments and your thoughts below, and I will hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye.